Have you ever imagined dying and coming back with a direct message from Jesus about the end of times? 16-year-old Jaden was dead for 9 minutes, and what he saw will leave you speechless. A terrifying sight, an urgent call, and a question that no one can ignore. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below which city you are watching. This message needs to reach as many people as possible. I remember the noise. It was the last thing I heard before everything disappeared. The pool whistle, screams, people running, then silence. A silence that seemed to weigh on my chest more than the lack of air. My name is Jaden Moore, I'm 16 years old, and for 9 minutes, I was dead. And in that time, I saw something that no one is prepared to see. At first, I didn't understand what was happening. I thought I had passed out. But when I opened my eyes, I was floating above my own body. I saw my face white, my lips purple. The trainer did compressions on my chest. One of the boys was crying. I tried to scream to say that I was there, but I had no voice. I had no body. That's when I realized I had died. But it didn't stop there. The floor disappeared. The school gym went up like smoke, and I started to fall. But it wasn't a downward fall, it was an inward fall, like I'm being sucked out of reality. And it was then that the shadows appeared. They were shapes, no face, no skin, just intention, an anger I've never felt before. I didn't see eyes, but I knew they saw me. One of them got so close that I could feel my spirit shrink. She whispered without sound, "He is ours." But before I could be pulled away for good, the light burst. Not ordinary light. It was like a living presence, an authority that made those things scream and disappear. And when I was enveloped by that light, I knew. It was him, Jesus. But he didn't smile. He didn't hug me. He stared at me like a king who was about to judge me. And in that instant, I saw everything of my life. Every word, every click, every hidden thought. And a question pierced my soul like a sword. What did you do with the time I gave you? And that was where everything changed. I didn't respond, I couldn't. Because the moment that question crossed my being, what did you do with the time I gave you? I felt everything I tried to hide coming to the surface. It wasn't a normal memory. It was as if my every attitude gained weight, shape. True. I saw my days as if they were chapters of a book written with fire. I saw myself laughing at stupid videos for hours while my sister cried in the next room. I saw my search history, the messages I deleted, the times I pretended to be fine just to maintain my pose. Everything was there, without editing, without excuses. Jesus didn't need to accuse me. The truth already did that for me. But what destroyed me the most was when I saw the opportunities. People who passed by me and who just needed a word. People at my school struggling with depression, addiction, fear. People asking for help without using sound. And me? I had headphones on, laughing, scrolling the timeline, ignoring the real world to live in a digital bubble. And Jesus showed me what that did. It killed the sound of eternity. It was then that he showed me something even more terrifying. A place. It wasn't heaven. It wasn't hell. It was between. A kind of weight. An immense field with paths everywhere. And there people, hundreds. Some seemed lost, others doped. And the scariest thing, most still had their cell phones in their hands. I approached a boy who looked to be my age. He was sitting looking at the floor. I asked with my mind, "Do you know where you are?" He replied, "I think I'm waiting, but I don't know what." I looked around and saw signs, portals of light and portals of darkness. And in the middle of all this, a river. Not water, but time. A living time running as if every drop was a chance that slipped from people's hands and no one saw. Jesus appeared again, this time alongside an enormous being made of time and glory. He told me, "You didn't die by chance. I showed you this." Because your generation is at war and doesn't know it. And there, everything made sense. The distraction wasn't just distraction. It was a plan, an attack, one-armed silence. And Jesus looked at me again. No shouting, no anger, but urgently. They are losing because no one is talking. When Jesus said, "They're losing because no one is talking," something inside me clicked. It was as if my entire soul had been awakened from a coma. That place I was in wasn't neutral. It was a war zone, but no one seemed to notice. Most people there just waited, as if eternity were an elevator that would one day simply arrive. But then, I saw what was really happening. The souls in that zone between were surrounded by chains, and only they weren't made of iron. They were from addiction, ego, distraction, pride, and fear. They seemed invisible, but when someone tried to move, you could see how much they weighed. A boy was trying to run towards the light, but he couldn't let go of the mirror he was holding. He screamed, "Tell me who I am," but the mirror only showed distortion. It was then that Jesus stretched out his hand and said, "Come." And at his touch I was pulled to another place, as if we had passed through a veil of reality. What I saw next was what made me cry like I've never cried before. It was an open field, dark, and there they were, the young people of my generation, hundreds, thousands, queued. But there was no light in their eyes. They were covered in broken armor, like soldiers who never knew they were in battle. Some had cell phones strapped to their faces like masks. Others were drowning in smoke, laughing at something that no longer existed. And there in the middle, a creature, giant, like a shadow with 1,000 faces. A demon that fed on wasted time and unspoken words. I felt his name without anyone speaking. Deception. He smiled while the young people sank into doubts, vanity, anger. I saw my colleagues there. People who post verse of the day but spend the night watching what they shouldn't. People who say God is in control but never hear his voice. And then I heard Jesus say, "That's the army the enemy is plundering, and they don't even know they're at war." Suddenly tears ran down my spiritual face, because I understood. This war is not fought with weapons. It is made of voices that fall silent. And that's when Jesus turned to me and spoke with the authority of a king and the sadness of a father. They think they have time, but time is bleeding. In that moment when Jesus said time is bleeding, everything stopped. The wind, the sound, even my breathing, if I was still breathing. And then I saw it. In the sky, a huge clock. But he didn't have numbers, he scored events. Each pointer pointed to things that were about to happen. And one of them was almost touching something that shined with its name. The last decision. It was then that a being approached. He didn't look human. His body changed color every second as if he were made of liquid time. I knew immediately he was a recorder, one of those who write down the choices of generations. He looked at me and said without moving his lips, "There's still time, but not for long." Behind him a room appeared that seemed to be made of light and fire. Inside, books, millions, but not ordinary books. They pulsed, sighed, as if they were alive. And then a book opened by itself. Jesus pointed to him and said, "This is the book of your generation." The pages began to turn by themselves. Each line was a name, and each name either shone like gold or burned like ash. But what crushed me inside were the blank pages. Live people, people with talent, influence, voice, but who never used any of that for something that really matters. And Jesus whispered, "They had pens in their hands, but they wrote only for themselves." I saw a name light up so bright it almost blinded me. It was a girl. I've never heard of her, but she used social media to pray, to encourage, to preach even with 200 followers. And Jesus said, "She saves more than most pastors." Then I saw a boy with thousands of followers, fame, contracts, everything. But his page was deleted. No, because he didn't do anything, but why nothing he did lasted beyond now. And then the book turned to my page. My heart almost stopped again. My line was half written. Jesus looked at me with eyes of fire and said, "You have spoken, but not as one who was sent." I wanted to scream. I wanted to go back. I wanted time. But the question came back like an arrow. What did you do with the time I gave you? And everything in me screamed for more chances. But the clock in the sky kept ticking. When the book closed, the sound that echoed was not that of pages coming together. It was from a spiritual thunder, as if the sky itself trembled at the reality of how many stories were being wasted. I was shaking. Even without a body, my soul trembled. Jesus led me to what he called the frontier, a limit, a point of no return. And there, on the horizon, of a space that seemed to have no end, I saw the abyss. Not with flames, not with pitchforks, it was worse, it was empty. An absolute void, the kind of silence that makes the soul scream. And there were people, not monsters, people, teenagers' face, from father, from grandmother, ordinary people, and everyone was stuck in memory loops. I saw a boy my age shouting, I knew it, but I thought I had more time." His scream didn't stop. It echoed as if each word were steel, but no one responded, because there was no longer an answer. The punishment was not fire. It was the eternal awareness that they heard the truth and ignored it. Jesus held me by the shoulder and spoke with a firmness that pierced my soul. "They have not been forgotten by me. They have forgotten me." I started to cry. I asked, "Can they get out of there?" Jesus shook his head slowly, his face full of pain. "The decision is on this side of the border, so there is only remembrance." That's when I saw a scene that will never leave my mind. A woman kneels near the edge of the abyss, screaming her daughter's name, crying, begging for more time, but her time had already expired. And even so, her tears fell into the abyss like flames. Jesus said to me, "Some pray too late. Others stop praying too soon. But those who pray truly move heaven." At that moment, I realized that the tears we shed here have weight there, and that praying for someone is more serious than we imagine. Every name that we forget to call out could be on the verge of the end. And then Jesus looked at me again. He wasn't mad, but I felt the entire universe fall silent when he said, "Now you see, now you know," and knowing carries weight. I didn't want to see it anymore, but I knew it wasn't over yet. The truth was just beginning to be revealed. Jesus took me away from that abyss, but even as the view changed, I still heard the echoes of screams. This wasn't a horror movie. It was real. It was eternal. And still, most people alive don't even think about it. The next scene looked like a battlefield, only frozen in time. Soldiers of all ages, especially young ones. But they were sleeping. Yes, sleeping. Some with headphones. Others laughing, others lying with eyes open but without soul. Jesus spoke without moving his lips. "This is my army, but they forgot they are at war." I saw people I know, school friends, influencers, preachers, famous people, all in shining armor, but covered in dust. Most didn't even know they were equipped. He never used a sword. And then he pointed. I saw a girl from my school. I never imagined that she was important spiritually. But when Jesus touched her with a look, I saw fire coming out of her mouth. She had called, she had a voice, she had an anointing, and I never knew it. Then came the part that broke me. A gigantic screen appeared above that sleeping army, and then the videos that each of them watched every day began to play. Futile, empty, funny videos, and Jesus' words echoed inside me. The voices they follow are shaping their destiny. I felt a weight falling on me, because I also followed these voices. I also made fun of serious things. I also laughed at evil and called it humor. I was also sleeping. But then I heard a sound, a cry. One of the sleeping soldiers began to stir. It was a boy with red eyes kneeling. He started to pray, very quietly, but truthfully. And at that moment, a flash tore across the field. Jesus spoke with force. When one arises, thousands are awakened. That boy's prayer turned into a fire that ran among the sleepers, burning lies, lighting eyes. And Jesus said, "I don't need crowds, I need waking voices." And then he looked at me, and for the first time he asked a question that didn't require an answer in words. It came as a call that could not be ignored. Are you going to be one of them? Or are you going to stay asleep? After that question, are you going to be one of them? Or are you going to stay asleep? I remained silent, not out of fear, but because my soul knew that the answer would not be spoken. It would be lived. That's when Jesus took me to a place that seemed made of solid eternity, a golden, silent hall with columns of light that touched infinity. In the center, an altar, and on the altar, a sealed book. It wasn't like the first one. This one glowed more brightly. It was as if every letter there was made from a living soul. Jesus pointed out, and the seal started to come apart on its own. The book opened. Inside I saw pages of names, but now each name carried a mark. Some glowed liquid gold. Others were in smoky gray, as if they had been erased. And then I saw something that made me tremble, my name. But it didn't shine. It was half burnt, not erased, but as if it had been written with fire and then suffocated by smoke. I looked at Jesus and said with my spirit in pieces, "Why?" And he responded with the most intense look I've ever seen. "Because you used what I gave you, but not for me." At that moment, memories attacked me like arrows. I saw when I preferred being popular to being true, when I hid my faith because I got it wrong, when I was silent while someone begged for meaning but I only responded with a meme, and Jesus whispered, "You spoke, but you didn't speak for me." Suddenly I saw social media as rivers, some dark, others golden. Each post was a drop, each like a seed. But what chilled me to the core was seeing that words thrown to the wind here create paths in eternity. I saw influencers with millions of followers, but their rivers went straight into the abyss. And I saw girls who prayed in stories, boys who posted verses at dawn, people with 30 views, and its rivers were stairs to heaven. Jesus looked at me and said with authority, "You still breathe, so the book can still be rewritten." But then, something else happened. The entire environment shook. Lights went out. The sky crackled, like cracking glass, and a voice, which was not Jesus's but which silenced eternity, spoke from above. "The clock has turned." And when I heard that, I knew. The weather just changed. When that voice echoed saying, "The clock has turned," the entire universe seemed to hold its breath. It wasn't just a sentence, it was a decree. And I understood without anyone needing to explain. Something had changed in the spiritual world. Jesus stood before me, no longer like that fiery-eyed man who judged me. Now he was like a commander in front of his soldier. Behind him, the sky opened, not blue but like a rift in dimensions. And I saw what no movie, no sermon, no book could ever describe, was the final preparation. Hosts, angels, rows and rows of celestial beings wielding weapons that looked not like swords but like pure will. They were ready. And even without moving my lips, I heard one question from all of them. Who will raise their voice? On the other side, I saw Earth, but not as we are used to seeing. It was like a field with cracks. Light came out of some regions, like small pockets of resistance. But most were shadows, people chasing wind, divided. Families, addicted children, distracted churches, souls screaming for meaning in silence. Jesus pointed to a group, young people like me. People with cell phones in their hands but with chains on their wrists. Influence but no direction. Voice but without purpose. And he said, "These are the messengers, but most still sleep." It was then that the sky touched the earth with a sound. I don't know how to describe it. It was not music, nor thunder, nor words. Was decision. It was as if the sound asked, "Now what? What are you going to do with what you know?" And then I understood. It wasn't enough to see. It wasn't enough to feel. It was time to choose. Jesus approached. The light around him seemed to burn without hurting, like a truth that purifies. He extended his hand and spoke, now in an audible voice. "Jaden, the war has already begun. Are you going to fight, or are you going to watch?" My spirit trembled. It wasn't a threat. A summons. And at that moment I knew. Every word I say could be a soul lost. Every choice I make from here, it is a cry in the spiritual world. The curtain was closing. But before everything disappeared, Jesus gave me one last vision. And what I saw, it was the scariest of all. The last vision came like an explosion. Not slow, not gentle. It was as if the sky itself tore the veil between the visible and the invisible. Jesus held me, but even so I felt like I was falling into absolute truth. And then I saw it. We the enemy's plan. Not with horns, not with fire. His plan was silent, modern, convenient. It was made up of distractions that looked like freedom, of pleasures that seemed harmless, of lives so busy that they forget to ask, what was I created for? I saw schools as sleeping camps. I saw social networks like dark tunnels that sucked souls into an abyss made of comparisons and lies. I saw churches where the glory had gone, but the schedule continued normally. And then, I saw hell. Not in the cliché way with fire and monsters, was an absolute void, as if God had never been there. And in it, there were people, thousands, and each one lived trapped in a memory loop, all reliving the moment they heard the truth and ignored it. I saw a boy, maybe 14, who was crying. I knew it was true, but I wanted to wait. I just wanted to enjoy it a little longer. But there was no more time to go back. I saw a woman who said, "But I prayed." And a voice replied, "But he never surrendered." What tore me up the most was seeing that no one there was forcibly dragged. Each chose to ignore. Jesus said to me with a heavy heart, "They weren't punished. They distanced themselves until they couldn't hear anymore." And then I saw a line, thin, almost invisible, separating light from darkness. And about her, we were us. The generation that still breathes, the generation that can still choose. I saw names floating over that line. Some began to shine, others turned off. And Jesus told me something that I will carry to the end. You think you have time, Jaden, but time is a gift. And a gift is not given back. It is lost. And then he looked at me with fire in his eyes. When I return, I will not seek crowds. I will seek faithfulness. The sky began to close. The clock sped up. And Jesus said, with a voice that shook even the spirit of the stones around, "Now you've seen it. Now you carry it." And at that moment, I was thrown back. It was like being pulled into a gale of light and sound. My soul screamed, but not from pain, from urgency. I felt like everything was ending and beginning at the same time. The presence of Jesus still surrounded me, but he no longer spoke. He waited, and before I crossed back, he did one last thing. It wasn't a word. It wasn't a gesture. He was a question. But this question was not heard with ears. It was felt with the whole soul. What are you going to do with what I gave you? I felt the question explode inside me as if it were a living being itself, and with it came the flashes, the gift of speaking. Influence. On networks, time wasted on nonsense, the opportunities I ignored, the people who came past me looking for something real, and I only offered jokes. All of this was what he gave me. And all of this, it was what I hadn't returned. The question did not come with judgment. It came with weight, with glory. She didn't condemn me. She me called. And before I fell into the body again, Jesus looked at me one last time. This time, not as a king, not as a warrior, but as a father who still believes in his son, even after everything. I didn't come back because you deserved it. I came back to you because there is still time for others. Those were the last words that echoed in me before the fall. Then came darkness, then the pain, then the scream, then the hospital. But none of that matters as much as what remained. To this day, when I close my eyes, I hear the question again, whispered within my spirit like a contained flash of lightning. What are you going to do with what I gave you? And I know, see, this question, it wasn't just for me, it was for you too. If you're hearing this, it's not by chance. You have been called, you have been seen. And now that you know, you also carry. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.